Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something you probably didn't learn in school, but honestly, you should have. We're heading into the highlands of ancient Ethiopia, a land where the moon was more than just a pretty nightlight, and calendars were, well, let's say extra. You're about to live through a version of timekeeping that feels like a blend of astronomy, storytelling, and a little bit of mystical logic. You might think you've seen weird calendars before, like those cat ones your aunt hangs in the kitchen, but trust me, ancient Ethiopia's time system is on a whole other level. 13 months, yes. That's not a typo. And somehow, they still manage to have 365 days. Try explaining that to your math teacher. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, I'd love to know, what city are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one before bed. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up before sunrise. Or, at least, you think it's before sunrise. The sky is tinted a soft blue, and somewhere in the distance, a rooster lets out his second round of existential screaming. Smoke is already curling out of chimneys, and someone's chopping vegetables with alarming speed. You check your watch, 6 a.m. sharp. But no one here cares about your watch. In this world, 6 a.m. is not 6 o'clock. It's 0. The beginning. Welcome to Ethiopian time, where the day starts with the sunrise, not some invisible moment in the middle of the night when you're still scrolling on your phone. So, when someone here says 3 o'clock, they might mean 9 a.m. in your terms. It's confusing at first. You start to understand why yesterday that kid looked so confused when you said it was 3, and then took you straight to lunch. This system is often called local time. Each day is split into two 12-hour cycles. Daytime starts at sunrise, roughly 6 a.m., and nighttime starts at sunset, around 6 p.m. Of course, 6 o'clock is just symbolic. It shifts a little with the seasons. But the whole rhythm flows with the sky, not your phone. You're sitting now on a little wooden stool outside someone's house, watching a small pot of coffee heat over a glowing charcoal stove. People around you are chatting, teasing each other, and even analyzing their dreams from the night before. Seriously, dream interpretation is casual breakfast talk here. And no joke, dreaming about losing teeth? Apparently, that means you should watch out. It might be the end of the year energy catching up to you. You take a sip of the strong, earthy coffee. Ethiopian coffee, by the way, is no joke. It's rich, aromatic, and somehow makes you feel like time has slowed down. And maybe, that's the point. You realize this place treats time like a river, not like a mechanical grid with sharp corners. Hours feel like moods, not measurements. Some villages even have two different rhythms depending on the season. In the rainy season, people sleep early and rise early. During the dry season, the days stretch longer, and naps are sacred. You spot someone lying under a tree at noon, using a sugarcane stalk as a pillow. You figure he must be lazy. But when he wakes up, he casually says, "I'm off to fix the terraces at 3 o'clock. That's their 3 o'clock, your 9 a.m. He's not lazy. He just lives on a different wavelength. You ask if he has a watch. He laughs and shakes his head. "I can feel the time." You look around. There's no clock tower. No beeping phones. Just the sun and the birds. And yet, somehow, everyone's on time. You visit a local school and ask the teacher how kids learn time here. She points to the mountain behind the village. When the sun hits that tree up there, it's 3 o'clock. When it reaches the courtyard, it's lunchtime. When it touches the far slope, it's evening. No math, just observation. And weirdly, it works. You start thinking maybe your phone clock is the fake one. Of course, this time sense has sparked debates. Historians still argue whether this solar-linked rhythm is a product of refined astronomical knowledge or simply tradition passed down with a wink and a nudge. Some say it's science. Some say it's survival instinct. You're just enjoying waking up naturally, without an alarm blaring in your ear. A kid nearby shouts, "It's 9 o'clock." You glance at your watch, 3 a.m., technically. But yeah, he's absolutely right. In his world, it's mid-morning. You smile and walk into the kitchen to help prep breakfast. It's just a regular day. But somehow, time feels slower here, stretchier, like soft dough, not the conveyor belt of deadlines you used to run on. And you think, maybe it's not that these people are slow. Maybe it's just that you've been living too fast. You're walking through a village path when you hear a bell ring in the distance. A soft, metallic tunning, echoing through the crisp morning air. You look around, no school nearby, no clock tower. Just a small stone church on a hill, half hidden behind eucalyptus trees. You follow the sound. Turns out, it's coming from a monastery. Not the big, touristy kind with souvenir shops and audio guides, but a quiet, humble place where the walls lean slightly with age and the doors creak with dignity. As you step through the low wooden gate, the scent of frankincense and roasted barley greets you. A monk nods at you. He's wearing all white, with a tall wooden staff and the kind of beard that tells you he knows things you never will. You notice a large wheel-shaped drum near the chapel. It's called a kanat, and it's not just for making noise, it's a timekeeper. In this world, bells and drums are more reliable than clocks. And honestly, they feel a bit more dramatic, which is always nice. The day here is marked not by minutes and seconds, but by a carefully choreographed series of sounds. Each bell means something. A short bell might mean morning prayers. A long, slow drumbeat could mean a funeral is passing through. And if there's a pause followed by 3 quick rings? Time for the community meal. You ask one of the monks how they remember it all. He smiles and says, "We don't memorize. We listen." In this sacred rhythm, time is not something to track, it's something to tune into. There's divine time, when prayers and rituals take place. And there's earth time, when people farm, eat, and take naps under fig trees. You start to notice how even animals fall in line with this rhythm. Chickens gather at the same hour every day without being told. Cats mysteriously show up when incense is lit. It's a little eerie. You walk through the stone courtyard and hear faint singing. It's chanting in Guizi, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopia. Most people today don't speak it in daily life, but the church still holds onto it like a family heirloom. The chant sounds like waves lapping against an old boat. Calming. Slow. Absolutely impossible to hum along with, but beautiful nonetheless. There's an ancient concept here called Zeman, meaning both time and era. And not all time is equal. Some hours are blessed. Others are mundane. A few, like the hours right before dawn, are considered particularly sacred. Not because they're early, but because they sit on the edge of 2 worlds, night and day, sleep and waking, old and new. You see a boy lighting a small oil lamp in a niche carved into the wall. No switch. No electricity. Just flame and focus. You ask him what time it is, and he says, the 6th hour. You pause. 6th hour. Of what? He shrugs. Of the prayer cycle. Of the day. Of everything, really. Helpful. And yet, you start to get it. Time here isn't a single road with mile markers. It's like a braid of timelines, all running side by side, religious, agricultural, seasonal, lunar. Depending on where you stand, or kneel, you're living in one or another. This multi-layered sense of time has fascinated scholars for decades. Some argue it's a remnant of ancient Jewish and Egyptian traditions. Others believe it evolved purely out of necessity, shaped by landscape, weather, and faith. To this day, no one fully agrees. Because it's hard to study something people don't explain. They live it. You stay for the evening prayers. The sun has started to lean toward the mountains, and the courtyard glows in that golden hour light photographers lose sleep chasing. You sit quietly, not understanding a word, but somehow following every beat. And then, another bell. The day shifts again. Not in a jarring way, like a phone alarm. More like a sigh. A breath. We've moved on, kind of moment. You walk away slowly, barefoot on cool stones, wondering what it would feel like to live this way long term. No wristwatch. No buzzing phone. Just listening for the next bell. You're walking along a dusty trail just after sunrise, when a man waves at you from a hillside, herding a group of sheep with nothing but a stick and a very confident whistle. You wave back, but he's already turned his gaze skyward. No, not for dramatic effect. He's literally checking the stars. Turns out, this man, who insists you just call him Tesfaye, no titles needed, is a shepherd. But don't let the relaxed vibe fool you. Tesfaye is basically a walking planetarium. He knows which stars mean rain is coming, which moon shapes are bad luck for travel, and when the star of barley rises to signal it's time to plant the next crop. You try to look impressed. You are impressed. And so begins your informal class on Ethiopian sky reading. You sit with Tesfaye under a scraggly tree while his sheep do sheep things nearby. He starts pointing to the sky with a stick that looks suspiciously like it was once a curtain rod. "See that bright one," he says. "That's Erat Minch. When it rises right after sunset, we know we're halfway through the dry season." You nod slowly. You're not sure you see it. You also didn't know people still did this. But here, in these rural parts of Ethiopia, the sky is still a living calendar. Forget fancy weather apps. For centuries, maybe even millennia, people here have relied on the stars to guide farming, festivals, and even marriages. There's a term you hear a few times, Zeman Jermai, loosely translating to the season of blossoming. It's not a fixed date on a calendar. It's a phase, a vibe, a moment in the cycle that's felt more than calculated. And here's the best part, everyone's got their own version. One elder might say the season begins when Orion's belt appears just above the horizon at twilight. Another might say it starts when a specific bird begins nesting near the river. Yet another might swear it's when the scent of coffee blossoms first fills the air. You ask who's right. Tesfaye shrugs and says, "Yes." Academic historians, by the way, hate this. They want hard dates, documented cycles, measurable data. But when it comes to the traditional Ethiopian sky calendar, most of the knowledge is passed down verbally. No paper trail, just stories, stars, and trial and error. So yes, the scholarly debates continue, and probably will forever. You ask Tesfaye how he remembers so much. He chuckles. "If I plant too early, the crops die. If I plant too late, they drown." That's motivation. Fair point. He shows you how he observes the movement of shadow lines on a specific rock near his farm. Apparently, if the morning sun hits a certain crack just right, it means the short rains are 10 days away. You stare at the rock. It looks like a rock, but you take his word for it. And then he drops this on you. Some say the stars are angels' footprints. They walk at night to remind us we're not alone. You don't know how to respond to that, so you just sit in silence for a while, watching the breeze dance through the grass. Eventually, Tesfaye calls his sheep with another whistle, grabs his stick, and heads off. You realize you've just received a full-on celestial crash course from a man with no degree, no telescope, and no internet, but with a mind that reads the heavens like a diary. You check your phone out of habit. No service. But weirdly, you don't care. You've got a rock, a shepherd, and a sky full of footprints. That seems like more than enough. You're back in the village again, thinking you've started to get the hang of things, until someone casually mentions that tomorrow is another holiday. You blink. Didn't we just have one yesterday? They nod, entirely unfazed. Yes, but that was St. George's feast. Tomorrow is St. Michael. Different vibe. You do a quick mental check. That's 3 festivals in 5 days. Your Western mind, trained to wait months for long weekends, is struggling to compute. Welcome to the wonderfully packed, spiritually infused, and calendar-busting world of Ethiopian religious holidays, where feast days are so frequent you start to wonder how anyone gets anything done. In fact, you start to suspect that time in Ethiopia isn't just told by months or days, it's told by festivals. Here's what you learn. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church recognizes over 250 feast days in a single year. Some are full-blown nationwide celebrations, complete with fasting, dancing, and the burning of frankincense. Others are more local, celebrated by a single community or even just one household that keeps a tradition alive. And unlike your calendar app that gently reminds you, upcoming, dentist appointment, the local method of remembering holidays here is something closer to collective muscle memory. Everyone just knows. It's in the rhythm of the week, in the way the market smells, in the songs sung by children in the evening. You learn that Wednesdays and Fridays are fasting days for many Orthodox Christians. Not fasting as in juice cleanse, but as in no animal products, no dairy, and no meat. You try to keep up. You last until about 11 a.m. before a kind grandmother slips you a samosa. It's full of lentils though, so technically still fasting approved. You begin to realize that food itself is a kind of clock here. The smell of dabo, a spongy, golden bread, rising from clay ovens tells you a festival is approaching. The presence, or absence, of meat on a plate lets you guess whether it's a sacred week. Even the number of coffee rounds being poured gives clues. 1 round. Casual. 3. Definitely something's up. During your wanderings, you stumble into preparations for mescal, one of the biggest celebrations of the year. There's a towering pile of wood in the village square, waiting to be lit in the evening. A kid tells you this represents the finding of the true cross by Saint Helena. You nod like you totally knew that. You didn't. But here's the thing, each community celebrates in slightly different ways. In one village, people wear bright yellow shawls. In another, the same festival might include a lakeside baptism or a candlelit walk. There's no single script, and yet it all somehow feels coordinated, like an orchestra that never rehearsed but always lands on the right note. You overhear an old man grumble, "Back in my day, we had more holidays." You're not sure if he's nostalgic or just tired. Maybe both. Naturally, historians can't fully agree on how or when this festival frequency evolved. Some claim it's rooted in pre-Christian harvest rites absorbed into Christian practice. Others argue it's simply what happens when you blend ancient seasonal observances with a deeply devotional society. You know what scholars love? Arguing. You know what villagers love? Celebrating. Guess who wins? You spend the evening sitting around a bonfire with music, laughter, and generous portions of injera and shiro. Someone hands you a tiny glass of tej, a honey wine that tastes like sunshine and very poor decision-making. You smile, clink glasses, and finally stop asking what day it is. Because here's the trick, when every day holds a little bit of celebration, you stop living for the holiday, and start living in it. It's early morning, and the village is unusually quiet. Not the sleepy kind of quiet, more like the deep, focused quiet of a place that's in the middle of something. You notice the air smells different too, like fresh earth, wood smoke, and soap. Someone is sweeping their doorstep with a bundle of twigs. Kids aren't yelling. Even the dogs seem contemplative. You ask someone what's going on. They look at you, a bit surprised you have to ask. It's Enkutatash, New Year's Day. Ah, of course. Ethiopian New Year. You pretend you totally remembered that and didn't just think it was regular Tuesday. But unlike your typical countdown with champagne version of New Year's, this one doesn't begin with fireworks or noise. It begins with cleaning. Lots and lots of cleaning. And reflection. You're told that before the new year arrives, the house must be swept, the yard tidied, clothes washed, and, ideally, your soul aired out a little too. In many homes, it's customary to take a moment to forgive grudges, resolve old arguments, or at least silently promise not to give the neighbor that stink eye again. You know the one. There's no glitter, number 10-second countdown, no resolutions written in fancy journals. But there's a palpable sense of starting over, grounded in earth, not neon lights. And here's the twist, Ethiopian New Year falls in September, not January. It marks the end of the rainy season and the return of sunny skies and yellow mescal flowers, which bloom all across the highlands like little suns. The landscape is bright, washed clean, and hopeful. Which, honestly, feels like a much better time to start a new year than dead of winter January. You sit outside with a family as they prepare a New Year's feast. You're helping chop onions, even though everyone keeps politely moving your cutting board farther away because you're crying too dramatically. A little girl giggles and gives you a garland of yellow flowers. You put it on. You're now 30% more festive and 70% more tearful. You learn that Enkudatash means the gift of jewels, a name believed to date back to the Queen of Sheba, who supposedly returned from visiting King Solomon and was welcomed back with, yep, jewels. Whether or not that actually happened, historians are still politely arguing over tea. But the idea stuck, and the name stayed. Traditionally, children go house to house, singing songs and giving out hand-drawn pictures of flowers to elders in exchange for small coins. It's adorable and mildly chaotic. You get serenaded 3 times by a group of 5-year-olds, who then confidently ask for candy. You hand over an entire pack of gum like it's a sacred relic. What's beautiful about this New Year celebration is that it's not built around spectacle, it's built around intent. Intent to begin clean, to be present, to appreciate the rain that just ended and the harvest to come. The rhythm of the day builds slowly. Morning is for cleaning. Midday is for cooking. Afternoon is for gathering. And evening is for laughter, music, and, if someone really brought their A game, roasted lamb and spiced butter. You think about your last few New Year's days. Probably involved staring at fireworks through your phone screen or debating whether it's too early to go home from the party. This one feels different. Slower. Quieter. Fuller. You sit under the stars with a full belly and flower petals stuck in your hair. Someone asks if you've made a resolution. You think for a moment. Then shrug. Just be here more. Someone nods. That's a good one. You wake up to the sound of a rooster declaring his dominance over the entire valley, again, and you swear he's getting louder every day. But today, instead of heading to the usual breakfast fire pit, you're invited to join a group heading up into the hills. Today, someone says, is for sacred time. You nod slowly. You don't entirely know what that means yet, but it sounds like something you should definitely not be late for. As you climb the narrow trail, you learn that in Ethiopia, time doesn't just move forward, it moves in layers. Today, you're about to experience the strange and beautiful divide between sacred time and ordinary time. In most of the world, time is like a calendar you hang on your wall, linear, logical, and painfully color-coded. But here, time feels like you've stepped into a spiral staircase. Depending on where you stand, you might be closer to the divine, or just somewhere between breakfast and a nap. You reach the top of the hill and find a circle of elders sitting quietly, some with prayer beads, some just being. There's no ceremony, no sign, just a gentle silence that feels too thick to break. You sit down and try to blend in. You fail. But that's okay. Someone explains that in traditional Ethiopian belief, especially within the Orthodox Christian worldview, certain moments in time are considered more alive than others. These aren't just holidays or festivals. These are windows. Moments where the divine touches the earth more clearly. Times when prayers are more likely to be heard, and mistakes more easily forgiven. One elder leans in and whispers, "Between midnight and dawn? That's when the veil is thinnest." You're tempted to ask, the veil of what? But something in his eyes says just go with it. You remember the chanting from the monastery, the slow, rolling Guiz hymns that stretched across the morning like smoke. Those weren't just songs. They were instruments of time. Tuning forks of a sort, setting the tone for sacred hours. You're told there are different kinds of hours in the traditional day: equinoctial hours, canonical hours, and the wonderfully vague prayer hours, which don't always match up with clocks. Instead, they're marked by natural signs. When dew dries on the grass. Time for third prayer. When your shadow shortens under your feet. Time for sixth hour. When dogs start barking at nothing in particular. Night prayer time. You might laugh at that last one, but it's real. Dogs, it turns out, are pretty good monks. Sacred time, they explain, isn't just about when, it's about how you inhabit the moment. You don't just spend time, you honor it. Even mundane things, like grinding grain or fetching water, can become sacred if done with the right intent. Honestly, it's a bit like mindfulness, but with incense and goats. You hear a story about a farmer who refused to plant seeds on a day he called too loud. You ask what that means. Someone shrugs. The wind was wrong. Another nods solemnly. The bees were restless. Academic researchers really struggle with this stuff. Because how do you study a system where people say, it just felt like a quiet hour? But that's the point. Sacred time isn't always rational. It's intuitive, felt, observed like weather. You're handed a cup of barley tea, warm and earthy. As you sip, someone quietly begins a prayer, not performative, not rehearsed, just whispered into the breeze. No one answers. No one claps. But somehow, everything around you still responds. A bird lands on a branch. A breeze stirs the grass. A sheep sneezes dramatically. You sit in that sacred hour for a while. Not talking. Not moving much. Just noticing. And as the sun starts to shift, you realize that even though you didn't do anything, didn't build, didn't plan, didn't check off a list, you feel like you've lived more fully than you have in days. You head back down the hill slowly. Ordinary time is waiting for you below. But now you know that sacred time. It's always there, if you're quiet enough to hear it. You're halfway through your third cup of coffee. Yes, third, because in Ethiopia, coffee isn't just a beverage, it's practically a unit of time. When someone mentions that not everyone here uses the same calendar, you pause mid-sip. I thought there was one Ethiopian calendar, you say, trying not to sound too confused. They laugh softly. There are many Ethiopias. And just like that, your understanding of time, already bent and stretched like fresh injera, gets another unexpected twist. You decide to go exploring, this time beyond the main village, into areas where other ethnic groups live, each with their own traditions, beliefs, and yes, their own way of keeping time. Your first stop is with the Sidama people. They have a lunar calendar based on moon phases, used for agricultural cycles. You ask how they track it. An elder grins and points to the sky. We don't need watches. The moon tells us when to plant, when to harvest, and when to sit still. You resist the urge to look for a calendar app on the moon. Next, you meet someone from the Konso community. They use a system that blends ancestral memory and observation. Important dates are passed down orally, linked not to months, but to clan stories, heroic events, or periods of hardship. You hear phrases like, the year of the great locust, or the month when the mountain cried. It's poetic, slightly terrifying, and extremely non-Googleable. And then there's the Aramo Gada system. This one completely blows your mind. The Aramo people have a generational time system that organizes society into age-based classes. Every 8 years, a new group of leaders takes over. Not elected officials, just people who are the right age, who've gone through the right stages, and who've earned it. The Gada isn't just a political system. It's a calendar, constitution, and social contract all rolled into one. You try to imagine your life organized by 8-year blocks. 8 years of childhood, 8 of learning, 8 of leadership, 8 of retirement. It's weirdly appealing, until you realize you'd currently be in your responsibility era. Gross. What's fascinating is that none of these systems cancel each other out. People might use the Orthodox calendar for church, the lunar cycle for farming, and Gada for community decisions. It's a multi-layered understanding of time, like living inside 3 parallel calendars at once, all ticking gently in the background. You sit with a local teacher who helps students navigate between these calendars. Some of our kids grow up with at least 4 ways of telling time, she says. It's not confusing to them. They just shift, like changing shoes. You ask her how she keeps track of everything. She laughs. I use all of them. And sometimes I still forget birthdays. You begin to understand that calendar here isn't a rigid grid, it's more like a map of meaning. One that adapts to climate, community, ancestry, and purpose. Some dates repeat. Others drift. A few only make sense to one village by one river, and yet they're honored like holidays. Of course, scholars have tried to document all this. Some anthropologists carry around notebooks thicker than encyclopedias, desperately trying to chart the moving parts. But as one famously said after a decade of research, you don't learn the calendar. The calendar absorbs you. You walk back into town just as the sun slips behind the hills. A boy is helping his grandfather light a lantern. You ask what day it is. The grandfather strokes his beard thoughtfully. The 4th day after the rain. 2 moons before mescal. You nod slowly. That actually makes more sense than you'd like to admit. You're walking through a dusty pasture when someone yells your name. Okay, technically, they yell you. But hey, it's close enough. A group of kids waves you over to an old man sitting under a tree. He's wearing a wide straw hat, surrounded by what you assume are farm tools, and a chicken. Sit, he says. You want to know when to plant? You nod. He grins. Then ask the birds. Welcome to Animal-Assisted Calendar Calibration, Ethiopian edition. You quickly learn that in some rural areas, especially among traditional farmers, animal behavior is part of the timekeeping system. You've seen calendars marked by the moon, stars, rain, and saints, but this is the first time a chicken has been involved. He explains it like this: when the Hadasinkle birds sing in the morning, the short rains are coming. If the hyenas howl 3 times before sunrise, the maize will grow tall. And if the bees disappear too early, dig your yams now. You try not to laugh. It sounds like superstition, until you realize these patterns are based on observation, not magic. Over generations, farmers noticed certain animals react instinctively to environmental changes before humans do. They became organic barometers, measuring shifts in humidity, air pressure, and even magnetic fields without needing, well, science. And this isn't just folklore. It's practical knowledge. A herder tells you he doesn't rely on fixed planting dates. The calendar on the wall doesn't see the sky, he says. But the birds do. Kind of makes your weather app look silly, doesn't it? In one village, a woman shows you her insect list, a mental calendar based on the return of specific bugs. When a certain beetle starts crawling under her kitchen stones, she knows the barley harvest is 3 weeks away. You stare at the beetle. It does look determined. There's also the frog calendar. Yes, frogs. Their croaks get louder and more rhythmic just before the big rains. One boy imitates the sound for you, accurately enough that you wonder if he's part amphibian. When they sing like this, he says, my grandmother says, it's time to seal the roof. You're told that this knowledge isn't written down because it doesn't need to be. It lives in the habits of grandmothers, the instincts of children, the rhythm of village life. It's passed on during conversations over porridge, or while walking goats across hills. And though some of it might sound strange to outsiders, there's a surprising amount of overlap between what these farmers observe and what satellite data has since confirmed. That's right. Some of these chicken-based predictions turn out to align shockingly well with modern agricultural science. Scholars have started to take notice. A few have even begun compiling databases of animal indicators. But it's slow going because, unsurprisingly, the birds don't care about deadlines. You sit in the shade with the old man for a while longer. He tells you a story about a goat that once led a farmer to a hidden spring. You nod politely. He shrugs. Some say the goat was just thirsty. Some say it was a blessing. Both can be true. Eventually, he stands up, stretches, and hands you a handful of seeds. Plant these, he says. But only after the jackals bark 2 nights in a row. Not before. You take the seeds carefully. You still don't know what kind of seeds they are. But you're willing to wait for the jackals. You're resting in the corner of a small stone hut, watching someone carefully count out beans into a wooden bowl. You assume it's a recipe, until they stop at number 30, pause, and then move on to a second bowl. What's this? You ask. They smile. Pagum. The missing days. Ah. We've arrived at the mysterious 13th month of the Ethiopian calendar. If you thought 12 months was universal, like gravity or awkward family dinners, think again. The Ethiopian calendar has 13 months, and that final one? It's not really like the others. It's short. It's weird. And it's full of quirks. Officially, this 13th month is called Pagum, and it lasts 5 days, or 6 in a leap year. It's treated kind of like the forgotten attic of the calendar year. Not quite a full month, but not quite nothing either. It's tucked neatly at the end of the year, like someone saying, we needed just a bit more time. You learn that Pagum is more than just calendar cleanup. It's symbolic. It's a time for pause, correction, and recalibration. No major events are planned during Pagum. No weddings. No big decisions. Some say it's a time when the world catches its breath. Others say it's when humans should catch theirs, too. A teacher in the village explains, Pagum isn't an error. It's a gift. It's the time when we prepare to meet the new year without rush. You immediately think about how your own new year usually involves fireworks, chaos, resolutions made at 11:59 p.m., and mild regret by the 2nd of January. This sounds healthier. You also discover a charming tradition. People born during Pagum are considered lucky, a little outside the system. Some jokingly call them calendar-free children. Their birthdays don't quite line up with the usual rhythm, and somehow, that makes them special. You meet one such man, now in his 60s, who proudly declares, I've only had 60 birthdays, but I've lived 80 lives. There's also a practical reason for Pagum, and it's surprisingly mathematical. The Ethiopian calendar is based on a solar system of 12 equal 30-day months, which only gives you 360 days. That's 5 days short of a solar year. So Pagum fills in the gap, like the end-of-level bonus round in a video game. And yes, on leap years, it grabs an extra day. Smooth. You ask how taxes work during Pagum. You expect a joke, but instead, someone actually explains that in ancient times, Pagum was when royal accountants recalculated debt and land dues. That's right, these bonus days were when the state reviewed your numbers. You suddenly feel less romantic about it. Historians are still mildly puzzled by how Pagum came to be so widely accepted. Some link it to ancient Coptic calendar structures. Others point to Babylonian or Egyptian systems. The debate continues, fueled by scholars, monks, and that one guy who insists it all started with aliens. You don't ask further. But what's undeniable is the cultural feel of it. Pagum is liminal. In between. It's the hallway between years, where the old is already fading, and the new hasn't fully arrived. People use it to rest, visit relatives, reread letters, clean their homes, reflect on the year behind, and lightly dread the one ahead. You sit near the hearth as evening comes. Someone hands you a small plate of roasted chickpeas. No one's in a rush. There's laughter, soft conversation, a general air of, we'll get to it later. And you realize, Pagum might be the most honest part of the calendar. It doesn't pretend to be productive. It doesn't try to compete. It just exists. A soft landing before the next takeoff. You take another bite, lean back, and smile. Maybe every calendar needs a few extra days like this. You're leaning against a shady tree in the village square, flipping through your notebook. Yes, the one you swore you'd keep organized and now resembles a spiral-bound fever dream when you get the bright idea to convert Ethiopian dates into your own calendar. You think, how hard could it be? Oh, sweet summer child. An elder watching you struggle chuckles before you even ask. You want to turn Mescarum 1 into September 11th? Good luck. You blink. Wait, it is September 11th, right? He just shrugs. Sometimes. And just like that, you fall into the joyfully inconsistent, weirdly flexible vortex of Ethiopian to Western calendar conversions. Here's the first headache. The Ethiopian year is usually 7 to 8 years behind the Gregorian calendar. So, while your phone says it's 2025, their documents proudly say 2017. You do the math. You get confused. You redo the math. You're still confused. Eventually, you just give up and start writing the word, approximately, a lot. The difference stems from competing timelines for the birth of Jesus, based on different theological calculations from ancient religious scholars. Yes, this whole system hinges on centuries-old arguments about birthday math. And no, they haven't really stopped arguing since. Historians, am I right? You try using an online converter. It helps, until you realize it doesn't always account for leap years the same way. Ethiopian leap years pop up every 4 years, too, but they adjust in Pagum, that mysterious 13th month we just got cozy with. So yeah, bonus chaos. Even worse. Ethiopian New Year doesn't start on January 1st. It starts in Mescharim, which usually lands on September 11th in the Gregorian calendar, or September 12th in leap years. That means their new year and yours are basically out of sync forever, like two ships passing in the fog, waving politely and never docking. Then come the holidays. You think you figured one out, say, Timkit, the Ethiopian Epiphany. You write it confidently in your notebook, January 19th. Then someone corrects you. No, it's January 20th next year. You look betrayed. They smile patiently. Depends on your calendar. Ours shifts just a little. The saints are flexible. You ask, only half-jokingly, is there a master list? They look genuinely confused. A what? You resort to a flowchart, then to a spreadsheet, then to despair. Eventually, you just write things like Market Day, probably Wednesday, or Saints Feast, somewhere in late Tikkumt. The truth is, Ethiopians don't really need to convert their dates to the Western calendar. Most people use both fluently, switching back and forth like bilinguals. Ask someone when they're traveling, and they might say, on the 10th of Haidar, that's like around mid-November. They shrug. It's chill. Meanwhile, you're frantically Googling time zones. You start to realize that this fluidity isn't a flaw, it's a feature. People here are comfortable with time being a little elastic, a little open-ended. You don't need to know the exact hour of something, just whether the moon will be out, or if the saints have finished their coffee. In fact, this whole experience makes you reflect on how obsessed you used to be with precision. 3:07 p.m. meant something exact. Now, you find yourself saying things like, after second coffee, or sometime before the goats head home. And weirdly, everyone still shows up on time. Their time. So, you close your notebook. You stop trying to make the calendars match like puzzle pieces. Instead, you start jotting down both sets of dates side by side, letting them exist like twins with different personalities. One punctual and digital, the other barefoot and mystical. And when someone asks you what day it is, you just smile and say, well, depends who you ask. You're lounging on a woven mat outside a tea house when a local storyteller begins speaking in that classic, I'm not saying this is true, but also I'm not saying it's not, tone. There was once a king, he says, who tried to make everyone follow one calendar. It did not go well. You sit up. This sounds promising. As the story unfolds, you hear about an ambitious monarch, possibly one of the later Solomonic emperors, though names are fuzzy, who wanted to standardize all the various Ethiopian time systems into a single, neat, easy-to-manage structure. One calendar to rule them all. You can already tell this is going to end in either disaster or goats running wild. Possibly both. According to legend, this king gathered priests, elders, astronomers, farmers, and village chiefs from across the land. He declared, from now on, we will all follow the same calendar. No more moons for you, no more saints for you, no more animal signs or harvest cycles. Just one system. Clean. Logical. Everyone clapped politely, then immediately ignored him. Because, you see, calendars are personal here. They're not just tools, they're tied to how people live, believe, and remember. Changing a calendar in Ethiopia isn't like changing fonts in your planner. It's like someone trying to rearrange your memories. The farmers insisted they still needed the stars and birds. The priests needed the liturgical rhythm of saints and fasts. And the elders? Well, they had 50 years of moon shadow notes in their heads and weren't about to toss that out for some imperial spreadsheet. Naturally, tensions rose. In one version of the tale, a group of villagers responded by holding festivals on the wrong day on purpose, just to confuse the king's messengers. In another, an old priest refused to move his annual feast of Saint Rigel, because Rigel doesn't like Tuesdays. You ask if that's historically verified. Your storyteller shrugs. Historians say it's exaggerated. I say, Rigel still doesn't like Tuesdays. Whether the story is fact or folklore, or something woven from both, it speaks to something real. Time is power. To control the calendar is to control when people gather, what they remember, and how they connect to the sacred. This isn't just true in Ethiopia. Throughout history, rulers everywhere, from the Roman emperors to French revolutionaries, have tried to reset time, to rewrite weeks, months, and years. Ethiopia, with all its layers of time, simply said, "Nah, we're good." Even today, remnants of these attempts at reform exist. Some schools teach multiple calendars side by side. Government documents are issued with dual dates, Ethiopian and Gregorian. Banks run on one system, rural markets run on another, and people move between them without blinking. You begin to admire it. Not the messiness, but the flexibility. Here, time isn't one track, it's a village. Multiple roads, different houses, shared meals, occasional disagreements, but somehow still a community. You hear one last line from the storyteller. The king who tried to unify the calendar ended up dividing the palace. You ask if that means the plan failed. He grins. The palace still stands, but the calendar, still wild and free. You sip your tea and write that down. Because somewhere in that sentence is a truth you can't quite explain, but you're pretty sure it's important. You're sitting near the market, nursing a cup of bunna and watching the slow swirl of daily life. Women weaving baskets, teenagers haggling over mangoes, a donkey blocking traffic with the quiet confidence of a seasoned commuter. Everything feels timeless. And then someone says a phrase that snaps you right back to reality. This is the time of the board. You pause. What now? They explain. Once upon a time, not that long ago, actually, a group of colonial officials came to Ethiopia and decided the local time system was too inconvenient. Too different. Too Ethiopian. So they tried to replace it with their own spoiler-free version. It did not go smoothly. You learn about a period during Italian occupation in the 1930s when the colonizers attempted to modernize Ethiopia's sense of time. This meant more than just trains running on a different schedule. It meant trying to overwrite a deeply rooted cultural rhythm with a foreign tick-tock logic. Clocks were imported. Calendars were printed. Schools were told to teach the European system. Bureaucrats drew up office hours. And the people mostly ignored them. In the countryside, life kept flowing to the same ancient beat. Market days still followed lunar rhythms. Farmers still planted by bird songs and shadows. Priests still rang bells when the spirit, not the schedule, moved them. You hear about one village where a colonial officer tried to enforce new, standard time. The locals agreed, in theory. Then, every time he scheduled a meeting, they'd show up 3 hours late by his clock, but right on time by theirs. After a few weeks, he gave up and adjusted his clock instead. In cities, things got murkier. A new hybrid time system began to emerge, an awkward dance between Ethiopian and European hours. Office buildings used Western clocks, but homes stuck to Ethiopian time. You'd hear someone say, the bus leaves at 4, and then have to clarify, Ethiopian 4 or foreign 4? It was like living in two parallel realities, and everyone just adapted. Even today, you can feel echoes of this. Banks and airports use the Gregorian calendar and Western time. But outside those walls, traditional time still breathes, unbothered. You've officially reached the part of the timeline where time itself is bilingual. Some younger Ethiopians now flip fluently between systems, using one to punch into work and the other to meet their grandmother for lunch. When you ask if that's confusing, they shrug. Not really. Just depends who you're talking to. Historians still argue about the legacy of these foreign attempts to standardize time. Some say it introduced useful infrastructure. Others argue it created a cultural dissonance that never fully healed. Most agree on this. You can import a calendar, but you can't colonize how people feel time. You sip your coffee, watching the sunlight shift across the wall. A man next to you looks at his phone, then at the sky, then at his wristwatch, clearly unsure which version of 4 o'clock is about to happen. You smile and think, time here isn't just something you measure. It's something you negotiate. And Ethiopia, she never gave it away. You're walking along a narrow footpath between 2 rows of stone houses when a small boy runs past you barefoot, holding a handmade toy truck. He yells something back to his friends, something about a rooster and a wedding and a shadow, and you pause mid-step. You turn to your host and ask, did he just tell time with a rooster? Your host laughs. That means the wedding will happen when the rooster crows and the tree shadow hits the porch. You blink. So, like 10:30. Exactly, she grins. Give or take. Welcome to one of the most poetic and baffling parts of Ethiopian time, the use of nature's choreography as a day planner. Here, shadows are clocks, sounds are signals, and the smells in the air can tell you the hour. It's not just about minutes and numbers, it's about a deep, almost musical awareness of what the world around you is doing. You walk into a garden and notice an old man adjusting a chair. Not for comfort, for angle. He watches where the sunlight lands on the ground, nods to himself, and sits. Prayer time, he says simply. You check your phone. 3:18 p.m. He shrugs. Mid-afternoon. In many rural homes, the day unfolds according to where the sun hits the doorframe or when the wind changes direction. One woman tells you she starts cooking shiro when the first coffee scent from the neighbor's house drifts in. That's the sign, she says, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. You come across a family preparing for a local celebration. When you ask what time it begins, the uncle says, when the goats return from the hill. You follow his gaze. Sure enough, a single goat is already trotting home like it has an internal alarm clock. You're now suspicious of goats. This method of telling time is sensory, contextual, and hyperlocal. It makes sense only to the people who live in it every day. And yet, it works. Life flows. People arrive. Meals are cooked. Ceremonies begin, somehow always at the right moment, even if no one could tell you the time in numbers. It's a system built on trust in rhythms, not control. And there's something deeply relaxing about that. You start noticing your own awareness shifting, listening to how the wind picks up around noon, watching how light falls through tree leaves, catching the subtle pause in birdsong before evening arrives. Academics call this environmental temporality, and yes, they have entire papers about it. Some argue that this sensitivity to natural time has deep roots in agropastoral traditions, where success literally depended on watching and listening. Others say it's a cognitive adaptation. Humans evolved to tune in before clocks tuned us out. But here's what's wild. This awareness still persists in modern towns, even where smartphones and satellite watches are common. People will still glance at the sky instead of their wrist. Still sniff the air before deciding to go out. Still wait for the neighbor's rooster to make a decision. You talk to a teenager in town who plays video games but also helps on the family farm. I use alarms for school, he says. But my grandfather uses do. You grin. Who's more accurate? He thinks. Him. You both laugh. By now, you've stopped wearing your watch. You don't even know where your phone is. You just feel your way through the day. And strangely, you've never felt more on time. As you watch the sunset cast long, golden fingers across the fields, you realize, maybe time isn't something to chase. Maybe it's something to notice. You wake up to the smell of smoke and something warm bubbling in a pot. Could be lentils, could be destiny. Hard to say. You've officially been in Ethiopia long enough that time has stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like weather. Sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes cloudy, but always there. Today, your host is taking you to a place he calls the resting field. No, it's not a cemetery. It's where people go to do nothing on purpose. You've been chasing calendars, he says, but you haven't rested in them yet. Fair. You follow him past terraced hills and wild basil bushes, into a clearing with smooth stones, woven mats, and an absurdly comfortable-looking rock that probably has seniority over half the village. A few elders are already there, sitting quietly, not saying much. One is sipping tea. Another is watching clouds like they owe him money. You sit. You breathe. You wait. And something settles. Because here, in this field, you're learning the final, and maybe most important, secret of the Ethiopian approach to time. You're not meant to master it. You're meant to live inside it. The calendars, you realize, were never just systems for scheduling things. They were containers for life. For births and deaths. For rains and planting. For saints and shadows. For arguments and forgiveness. For all the small, slow things that don't fit neatly into 30-minute blocks. You think back on everything you've learned. How monks chant the hours like they're shaping the day with sound. How shepherds read the stars like maps written in light. How people pause in Pagume, waiting for the world to exhale. How multiple cultures, calendars, and clocks live side by side, not in conflict, but in quiet harmony. You remember asking someone what day it was, and them answering with a feeling, not a date. You remember how the time of a wedding was once announced by the position of a shadow and the mood of a rooster. You remember how you slowly stopped checking your phone and started checking the wind. Somewhere far off, you hear the soft ringing of a bell. Could be a church. Could be a cow. At this point, you kind of hope it's both. And as the clouds pass overhead, someone speaks. We don't keep time. It keeps us. No one says anything after that. Because really, what is there to add? You lie back on the mat. You watch the clouds. You don't care what time it is. Because now you know, in Ethiopia, time is not just a system. It's a story. And for a little while, you got to live inside it. And now, with the moon rising over distant hills and the world growing quiet, you can let it all drift. The bells, the birds, the beans, the birthdays with no exact dates. They've all slowed to a hush. You're no longer chasing deadlines. No longer counting the minutes. You're just floating through a softer rhythm. Maybe you're lying in your own bed now, or curled up on a couch with a warm drink and a sleepy pet nearby. Maybe you're still thinking about those shadow clocks, or the boy who measured time with goats. But let them fade. Let it all melt into that velvety twilight between wakefulness and dreams. Because this is your Pagume now, your in-between time. No obligations. No alerts. Just a moment to exhale and listen to nothing at all. Take one more breath. Let it out slowly. Time can wait. You're right where you need to be.